You need to work on your posture, push your shoulders back. And let's just take the next little bit together to talk about good habits that last and cultivating those good habits. So, lots of information for y'all today. But what we really want to do is focus on what we can control. So, again, my name is Abby Horton. I'm assistant professor at the Capstone College of Nursing, a registered nurse, a certified health and life coach, which is why I'm with you guys today. And I'm also a former Wellbeing Ambassador for the Honors College where I taught for 10 years, and I'm a wellness class educator. So my email is abby.horton at ua.edu. And if you'd like to reach out, if you have comments, questions, feedback, need to connect with resources, want to follow up about something, please feel free to reach out. My inbox is really constantly, it's an influx. I try to zero it out every day, and I don't always get to that. That's a habit that I really enjoy because it is so full and busy, but I do love hearing from y'all, and so please feel free to reach out. Some of our goals for today are to introduce and explore habit change, to discuss the importance of taking small action steps daily, and to learn specific strategies to actually cultivate habit change. So, in a lot of the classes that I teach, I will say to focus on what you can control and to forget the rest. So, the things that I present to you are not gold, right? It's not always life changing, but it can change your life. That's what I like to tell people. Um, and it's a lot of times the things that we already know to do, but knowledge doesn't equal habit change, and we really have to put the knowledge that we learned into action. And so I hope that's what inspires you guys today. I know that when I was updating the slides this morning, from time to time, I'll do updates on the slides just to make sure that I'm staying current and that the things that I'm teaching are really fresh and relevant. And also, sometimes I need to hear the things that I teach myself. There's an old adage about we teach the things that we need the most. And so that's definitely been true in my life. And so if you need to focus on habit change, we're going to talk about taking one small baby step at a time. And so this is a graphic that I put together several years ago, more as a reminder to me, but I think it helps us too, is to remember that our goal is not to eliminate all of our negative thoughts and feelings. It's important to realize that we aren't our thoughts and feelings. If you have a strong internal dialogue, a lot of chatter always going on in your brain, some people do, me, other people don't. But, that is not necessarily us. And to hear the negative thoughts, Dr. Daniel Amen calls them automatic negative thoughts or ants. And he says we need to kind of like smush the ants when we have those automatic negative thoughts. And so separating out our thoughts from who we are is really important. And realizing that our goal is just to change our response to those kinds of things, because so much in life we actually can't control. And that can be really scary to some and liberating and freeing to others, or a little bit of both. So we're not going to worry about what we can't control. We're going to think about the things that we can. And so there's a remote control that talks about your attitude and your effort and your actions and your behaviors. So many things that we can control, but usually it's just kind of with us, right? We can't control our environment or other people. It's really us and internally what we do and say, and externally what we do and say and think, and how we interact with others. And then I really want to encourage you to think about focusing on what you can control that matters. So I love a good Venn diagram. I always have. And it just helps me really center and focus on what's important. So, where the things that matter and the things that you can control overlap, that's where we really should spend our time and attention and our focus. Because the thing is there's a lot that we can control that doesn't matter, right? In the grand scheme of things, there are things that we can control in our environment that are really not going to be significant or important. But then there are also these things that matter that we have really very little control over. And that's what really feels scary sometimes. And so, where are the things that matter and where the things that control overlap? If we put our time and our energy and our effort and our focus there, we'll see the most impact and the most change. So, a quote by Mahatma Gandhi says, "Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions," so the things that we say, Your actions become your habits. So the things that we're doing become our habits, sometimes without us not even really realizing it. Your habits become your values, right? And your values become your destiny. And so when we think about our goals, I want you to really consider what goals you want to make or establish. And maybe there are some habits that you may want to leave behind, right? Maybe they're no longer serving you. But I want you to think about what are the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you want to do better or that you want to do more of, how those align with the values that you feel are important to you. Because we really do become the things that we think about, the things that we do every day. And sometimes we do that kind of on autopilot. We're not consciously thinking about the person that we want to be. So a few years ago, I decided that I wanted to set goals. And when I set goals, I set a lot of goals. And so one of the goals that I created for myself was that I wanted to read 100 books a year. And, I am one of those people that sometimes will set arbitrary goals. I mean, what did it matter that it was 100 books? Like, there was no significance. I just saw that, on Pinterest probably, and thought, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I'll read 100 books. But there was really no reason for me to set that goal other than I hadn't been reading for pleasure or leisure very much because I was in graduate school. And so everything I was reading was a kid's book to my kids, or it was a book that I needed to read for school. And I love to read. And so I thought, I want to read just for the fun of it. I used to do that all of the time. I want to do that more now. And so I set this arbitrary goal of reading 100 books a year, and I didn't make my goal, but I was really close. And I don't remember the exact numbers anymore, but I was very close to that goal. And I was disappointed that I didn't meet the 100 book goal, but I was reading mostly on my Kindle because they have a lot of great books for free or for a reduced price. And so I looked at the year before, and the year before I had read 3 books. And no, I had read more than that, but on my Kindle I had only read 3. And I had read dozens and dozens of books the year that I set the goal of 100 books but hadn't read any. And I just so happened to see this like blog post that said, when you're setting an arbitrary goal, think about the reason why you want to set that goal, and then think about the person that you're becoming by embodying that goal. And so it gave the example, and I'm so glad it did because that's what caught my attention. If you set a goal to read 100 books, but you only read 80, and the year before you only read, a handful of books or no books, then you've really accomplished so much, but you're not giving yourself credit for that. And also, the goal was to become a reader, not to read this arbitrary number of books, right? So you really did meet your goal of you wanted to read for leisure or for pleasure. You just didn't meet the arbitrary number of 100. And that really changed my viewpoint around setting habits and setting goals and New Year's resolutions because that's so true. My goal was to read for fun, and I did that. So I actually did meet the goal. I just didn't meet the very specific goal I had set. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes having a really specific goal like that helps you get there, right? It's like aim for the moon, and even if you don't reach the moon, you'll land among the stars. So I still do set very specific goals, but I don't get upset as much as I used to when I don't get that very specific goal because I still am doing better than I did the year before. So I hope that serves as inspiration and kind of gives you a mindset around how I view habit change. So we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit. And so Aristotle is um, one of the people who has, studied and who philosophized on habit change and human behavior. And so I think it's an important quote to think about, our excellence that we strive for so much is really a collection of habits that we do every day, that we do most of the time. It's not one simple act of excellence, but it's really a pattern of behavior. And patterns of behavior are just habits. So I always like to tell people that mindset matters. And the reason I say that is because if we set goals and we meet those goals, like say I had met that goal of 100 books a year, I don't know that the impact that I would have had on, my life and on the way that I approach the way that I set goals or the way that I work on personal development or professional development, I don't know that that would have been as impactful because reflecting on the reasons why I didn't meet the 100 book goal was actually more beneficial to me than having read the 100 books, right? And so the next year I did set a goal and I did meet that goal. I actually exceeded it. I read more than 100 books that next year, and while I was really excited about that, and I screenshot the Kindle app that told me that I had exceeded my goal, and that felt really great. I actually really learned more about myself and about goal setting the year before when I didn't meet the goal. So mindset really is key, and I always tell people mindset matters. So it all starts with yourself, right? Because for every person on the call, you all have probably a different reason for being here, a different goal that you want to set, a different habit that you want to change, or a different habit that you want to start. And you really need to think about why you want to do that. So I tell my nursing students all the time because nursing school is notoriously challenging. Remember your why. Why did you want to become a nurse? Because when things get hard and you want to give up, your why will anger you there, right? Your why will keep you coming back another day and trying again. If you don't have a really good reason for why you've set the goal that you've set, you might give up. But if you have a really strong reason why you want to do something and it's connected to who you are as a person, it's connected to your values, it's connected to something that you do every day, you're much more likely to not only meet that goal, but actually enjoy the process. And that's so important. Life is so much about the journey, not the destination. And we hear those kind of cliche comments and we don't always unpack them to think about, well, what does that mean for my life? But the thing is if we're always, and I'm very guilty of this, if we're always thinking about where we're going to get, right? Like the next destination, I'm going to get my degree, or I'm going to, work here 5 more years, or I'm going to retire at this age, or I'm going to get married at this age. If we're always looking at those milestones and we're not really kind of in the moment on the journey, then there's a series of milestones that we meet, but sometimes we end up getting to a milestone and realizing that we didn't really enjoy the experience of getting here. And we spend most of our life on the journey. We spend most of our life in between the milestones and the destinations, not actually at the destination, right? It's kind of like vacation. Vacation is a 1 or 2 week a year, probably at most in the US. That's kind of how our culture in our workplace culture is set up. We get around 1 to 2 weeks a year. So, and we get more than that. We're very, blessed and fortunate to have more off time and PTO than that at UA. But say you get vacation 1 to 2 times a year, then we're spending most of our life not on vacation, right? It's very similar to the journey versus the destination of those milestones. And so while we're working toward milestones, we also need to be working toward enjoying our everyday life because there's a famous quote. I actually quoted it to my husband this morning, not thinking that I was going to quote it to y'all. It's not one I usually use on this presentation, but I do love a good quote. And I said, it's by Annie Dillard, and it says, how you spend your days is how you spend your life, right? And so if we're always going to say, oh, well, I'll get to that one day, or, oh, well, this is a really busy week, but next week won't be busy. Literally, how we spend our days is how we spend our life. And so if we don't um, love the way that we're spending our days, then we might look back and not enjoy the way that we're spending our life. And so all that to say, we have to think about self-trust, self-compassion, self-belief. James Clear wrote a book on atomic habits, and I'll share it a little bit later in this next slide. But he talks about self-belief is so important because we have to change who we are and who we're becoming to change our habits. If we just try to set a new habit like drinking more water, or if we just try to set a new habit like exercising, every day, or whatever it is, if we don't become the person who would do those kinds of things and change something about ourself and our self-belief, then we're probably not going to stick to those habits, right? So if I say that I'm a reader, then I'm going to read books. If I say that I am an athlete, right? We don't have to have a professional athlete status or amateur athlete status. We can just say we're an athlete. We're going to work out every day. Then that becomes part of our persona and part of who we are. So we're going to look for ways that validate that for ourselves, right? And so self-trust, meaning that we keep promises to ourselves. If we say we're going to get up and we're going to work out, then we need to do that, because every day that we hit the snooze and we don't work out, then that's eroding our self trust, right? It's eroding our self belief because our brain is always listening. And so for years and years, I said, oh, I'm going to work out today. Today's going to be the day. And so I would do it and I'd be like, check, okay, I worked out, but I didn't make myself that person. I didn't make myself that fitness person, that athlete. And so when I started trying to change my health and my wellness and my fitness, I had to adopt a mindset of I am that person, right? And I am the person who would go and do those things. And that was the keystone foundational habit that I had to set for myself to be able to accomplish all the other books, right? And so self trust, self compassion is really important, because there are going to be days where you do hit snooze, right? We're human, we're not robotic, and we don't want to be robotic. There are days where we have to cancel our personal trainer or our friends that we were going to meet to walk at lunch with, or maybe we have to delay it, and it looks like we did a 15-minute walk instead of a 45-minute workout, and that's okay, right? Because we have to make space and margin in our lives to be human, and there are going to be days where we just don't do it. We just can't do it. And so the thing is that you don't want to make it a habit, right? So if you miss a day of drinking your water, or you miss a day of doing your exercise, you don't want to miss 2 days in a row, because that's when you start to kind of erode those habits. And I love this. Dr. Daniel Amen, his wife is a nurse and worked in the ICU. And he and she talked about in one of their blogs and in one of their Instagram reels about this notion of responsibility. And so people will always tell you, oh, you need to take responsibility for yourself. You need to take responsibility for your actions or for your habits. And that always, especially when I was really at an unhealthy place in my life several years ago, both in my mental and physical health, that was really difficult for me, because it felt very much like I was taking responsibility and like nothing else was actually doing, I was putting in a lot of work, but on the other side of the equation, there wasn't a lot going on. I felt like my effort did not match the outcome. And so I'm like, I am taking responsibility. Why are you saying I'm not? And I felt like everything I picked up was telling me, take radical responsibility for your life. And so the thing that I really loved, when I listened to Dr. Amen, is that he said, if we don't take responsibility for our actions and for ourselves and the things that we do, our habits essentially, then we're giving our agency or our power away to other people or to circumstances. And that was the thing that really clicked for me. So, responsibility is literally your ability to respond, right? Something happens and you take responsibility for responding the way that you want to respond. And that was the thing that I needed to hear. And that helped me change a lot of habits in my life. And it didn't mean that my circumstances changed, because a lot of times our circumstances don't change, but our thoughts, our actions, our beliefs about that, our feelings about that will change. And then those things change our result, because it changes our action. And that's actually called the coaching model. So circumstances usually don't miraculously change. But if we can change our thought about the action and realize that, when things are happening, they're happening for us, not to us, and that we have more control over our response to those things than we give ourselves credit for, um, and usually there's like a borderline kind of fear that we can't handle what's coming at us. And most of the time that's not true, right? Because we're still here, and we've probably all gone through a lot of hard days, and we're still here and we're still doing well. And y'all are actually taking really positive steps just because you're on this call today. And so you have everything that it takes to be successful. I say the same thing to my nursing students in first semester when they're terrified. And I say, you wouldn't be here if you couldn't do it. So we're all going to have imposter syndrome. That's life. But you've got this. You wouldn't be here if you couldn't do it. And that's my message really to everybody, right? To myself, to my kids, to you guys, to the coaching clients that I work with, because it's true. We can do this. We can handle it. And sometimes we need help and support. But most of the time, we just need to give ourselves a pep talk. And sometimes we need to outsource the pep talk. But if you can take over the pep talks for yourself, you're going to have a lot more agency and self confidence because you're not relying on anybody else for that, right? And a lot of times we like to ask other people for their input or other people for our encouragement or pep talks, and that's okay. But the more that we can do that for ourselves, the more powerful we become. And so that's something that I have to remind myself of. I'm sure you guys do too. But tools to cultivate a more positive mindset that is going to build that self confidence are things like practicing gratitude, journaling and reflecting, and doing these things daily, mindful moments, taking time for meditation, being outside in nature, especially getting sunshine, being under a canopy of trees near water. Those are all going to be really, really powerful ways of connecting back to nature and connecting to yourself, disconnecting from all of our technology, and really getting to know yourself in each season of life. Now that we've had the eras tour, I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan, but I love a lot of the things that she's done to just support and empower people to be their best selves. And I think there's some really positive things out of that. So I should say in this era of life, right? Like what season or era of life are you in? Because that's going to look differently. For me, my kids have always been really young. And now suddenly they're all in middle school and high school. And that's hard for me to even kind of wrap my head around. I've got one in UA early college, and she's going to be a senior next year. And then in the next 2 years, all of mine are going to be in high school or college. And for me, they're still my babies. It's hard for me to think about that and say, this is definitely a new season of life for me as I approach 40 and think about my babies growing up. So I have to kind of wrap my mindset around that of, okay, how am I going to show up differently for myself and for my kids now that we're entering this new season of life? And so it's something I'm thinking about a lot personally. Some books that I think that are really helpful, two of them I've listed here. I'll give you a couple others as well. But Atomic Habits by James Clear, he was inspired by Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit Change. James Clear has a ton of resources online. He has an app, he has a website, he has a newsletter that he sends out every Thursday. He has podcasts and, guest podcasts that he links a lot. There's just so many free resources. And I do think that he's the current, expert on habit change. And I think he has a lot of appeal. He uses real world examples, and that's really helpful. He also has a master class. So if you have a master class membership, we got that as a shared present. My husband and I wanted to have a master class subscription, and so we share that. And he did a 10 series class master class on habit change, and it was really, really good. So just but a ton of free resources out there. That's where I would start if you want to learn more or dig deeper beyond just what we've provided in the PowerPoint. Some other books I would say would be Carol DeWick's book on mindset. And so she talks about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And then Kelly McGonigal is a clinical psychologist, I believe. Um, she does, I think, sports psychology, so clinical psychology, and she has a book called The Upside of Stress. There's just a ton of resources out there, but those are a few of my favorites. But I would start with Atomic Habits. It's a big book. It's hard to get through if you're really engaging with the material, and so you may even just start with his newsletter or some of his other free resources first. So, the power of habit. People recognize intuitively how much their lives are habits. So, that's something that Charles Duhigg said, and he is a New York Times reporter and best-selling author of The Power of Habit. And he cites in his book a Duke University study that found that 40 to 45% of people's daily actions are habits or unconscious decisions. So my favorite example of this, and I always like to give y'all real world examples because it lets you know that I'm not just teaching from a textbook. I'm actually doing the work that I teach. Um, And that's what it requires. We don't ever really arrive at being, our best selves. It's always a journey. And so, one of the automatic things that we do is we drive to and from work. And it's been found that our brains will kind of, to conserve calories and to conserve energy, will kind of go into autopilot when we're driving a familiar path. So if you've ever scared yourself by getting to work or getting home from work and thinking, I don't really remember a lot about my drive to or from work or home, and that scared you a little bit, they've actually studied that and found that you're pretty safe when you're doing that because your brain is going into automatic, kind of autopilot mode because it's driven that route so many times. And so while I was trying to make healthier habits, I had to actually go home a different route. And I've shared this in other talks. Um, but I had to go home a different route because I'd be driving home either from the hospital when I was working as a floor nurse or even when I was teaching clinical. It was just a habit to drive home, and I would turn into the best place in town for Mountain Dew and sweet tea. And locals, y'all know where I'm talking about. And I would be in the fast food line with the little nugget ice, waiting for my Mountain Dew or my sweet tea if I was being really good that day. And I say good in air quotes. And so I would be in line, and I would sometimes be in line, and I would order my drink, my favorite drink, to finish on my way home without even thinking about it, right? I didn't make the conscious decision when I left work to go to that favorite fast food restaurant and order that drink, but I would do it out of habit. And so when I was deciding that I wanted to lose weight, I had about 85 pounds that I wanted to lose, and I needed to get healthy because I was starting to have a lot of heart issues. I had been diagnosed with a heart condition as a teenager, and that was starting to get more, noticeable and pronounced. And so it was a wake up call for me, right? I've got to get this weight off from my pregnancies, and really change my habits. For 6 months or more, had to drive a different way home, had to drive the long way home just so that I would not see the sign, because if I did, I would end up in the drive through. And so I went from drinking 6 Mountain Dews a day to it has been 11 years since I've had a Mountain Dew. And y'all, if y'all know me personally, you know what a struggle that is for me. When I get really stressed, and there are days where I get really stressed and I think, oh my goodness, I just want to go get a Mountain Dew. And in 11 years, I have not done that. But there are people who really, I mean, it was a true addiction for me. And so if you are trying to overcome a habit that you are just unsure of, it takes a lot of times. I mean, there are studies that show you may quit something, you may quit a habit 10 or 11 or 12 or more times before it ever sticks. And I can't tell you how many times I quit Mountain Dew before I quit Mountain Dew. But it was worth it, right? And today I feel very confident that if I were to go get a Mountain Dew, one, it wouldn't taste as good as I think it would, right? The memory of that Mountain Dew is probably better than the actual thing now that I haven't had it in so long. And I feel really confident that I would not be back in that drive-through line every day getting it, right? That I would have the power and the control to just drink one and move on. Because I've replaced that habit with really good changes. Now, because I was so addicted and because that was so hard for me, I'm not going to get a Mountain Dew. But I do still think about it sometimes, and that's okay. You have to really give yourself those pep talks. And so if you've quit habits before and you're like, this is not going to work for me, just keep trying. When you feel inspired, when you're contemplating, thinking about, okay, I want to make a change, it's for a reason, and this may be the time that it sticks. When I decided 11 years ago that I was not going to drink that Mountain Dew, I knew I was going to stick with it when I took the long way home because I'm the kind of person that I'm going to do the most efficient thing. And so when I realized that I was wasting my time and my gas, and most importantly, my time with my kids at home so that I could drive out of my way to not see that sign and not pull in, I knew that's when I had changed. And so I became the person that was no longer a Mountain Dew drinker. And like I said, I drink a minimum of 6 of those a day. And so one with each meal and one in between meals. And I was really addicted, but it was causing me a lot of heart issues. Um, so habit change, positive habit change is the foundation of health and wellness. We know that. Habit change is necessary for us to achieve our goals and meet those milestones we talked about. And habit change is really not about motivation, it's about discipline. Motivation is going to wax and wane, and it's going to depend on how nice your spouse or partner was, or your roommate or your kids. It's going to depend on, you know, the time of day, the, cycle of the month. It's going to depend on if it's sunshiny or rainy, how much sleep you got, just how blah you feel in general. But discipline is the art of doing the thing because it's time to do the thing, right? And that's what James Clear says in his book and in his podcast. He talks about, I don't work out every day and he names a time. I don't work out every day at this time because I want to or I feel motivated. I work out every day because I'm an athlete and this is when I train and that's when I do it. I do it at this time. Now, my life is not like that, and your life may not be like that either. I am in a faculty role where semester by semester, my life and my routine and my schedule looks different. Tuesday this week does not look anything like Tuesday next week. And so, if that is your life too, or if you just have other challenges, it's okay if you want to make a habit and it's not going to be the same time every day. I don't have that level of discipline. My level of discipline and or flexibility, right? Because it doesn't even just come down to discipline. It comes down to the reality is I can't do the things at the same time every day. And so the flexibility comes in and the discipline comes in where I say that, I cannot do that every day. Like, I cannot be that structured, unfortunately. I don't have that much control over my schedule. I'm not an entrepreneur or, unemployed, right? I have other things, other people I have to answer to. So my discipline and my flexibility come in where I say I may not be able to work out at the same time every day, but I'm going to work out this number of minutes a week, this number of times a week, and this is when I'm going to get this done, right? So it gets scheduled, but like yesterday, I worked out at 9 o'clock with my personal trainer. Today, I don't work out with my personal trainer. So that means that sometime between now and, when I get home today, I will have to do my workout. And that's okay because I wasn't able to get it done this morning. And that's fine. Tomorrow, I work out with my personal trainer and it's earlier than 9 o'clock tomorrow. And so it'll get done at a different time, but it will still get done. And so having discipline is showing up for yourself and doing the habit that you said you were going to do, even if it doesn't look like someone else's life. And it shouldn't, it's not going to. But motivation will definitely come and go. But if you're feeling really unmotivated, like you might feel motivated, I hope you feel motivated by this talk today. It might last a couple of hours. It might even last until you get to tell your best friend or, tell, the person that you see at home, right? Your spouse, your partner, whomever. I hope that it is so good and that you feel so inspired that you want to share it with someone when you get a chance. But then after that, your motivation or your excitement around this talk, it's probably going to fade and it's going to be replaced with whatever else is coming at you, right? And so you've got to build in your own motivation and your own action steps to keep that momentum going. And so that might look like texting your friend right now, like grab your phone if you're feeling motivated to do something for yourselves. Maybe it's health and wellness. Grab your phone right now and text a friend and say, hey, I'm listening to Abby talk about habit change, and I want to go start doing walks on my lunch break. Do you want to go walk tomorrow? And just see if they'll meet you, right? And so build in those kind of motivations where you're putting it on your calendar, because the things that you put on your calendar, you're going to have more accountability to that. And just because it's not, super work related, it's still going to impact the ability for you to show up really well, not only for work, but more importantly for yourself and for your family. And when you show up best for yourself, you're going to show up best to everything else, right? It's the spillover effect. And so get things on your calendar that you can look forward to and that inspire you and that remotivate you. And when you get that inspiration, use it, but realize that you've got to form the habit of this discipline first. And that comes with changing who you are, changing your persona. So the power of habit is a cue plus a routine plus a reward, and that creates a habit. So, said differently, kind of looking at it in words, the habit loop is set off by a cue. So, the trigger that tells your brain to go into automatic mode, right? So, that's getting in the car and probably fastening your seatbelt. And then there's the routine, like you're going home, okay? You're going to your favorite fast food place and getting your favorite drink on the way home. And then that routine can be physical, mental, or emotional. And there's a behavior attached, right? So me going and stopping and getting my favorite drink is that behavior. And then the reward is that first sip that you get. And it's so refreshing and so good. That's the reward. And it sets off that kind of dopamine pleasure response in your brain, and you feel good, right? And then you get the caffeine or the sugar or, whatever it is, and that is a double reward because that is then continuing that cycle, that feedback loop of dopamine hits. And so that's why it's so difficult sometimes for us to have healthy habits around food and drink and things like that, because when we're putting that in our body, there's this natural cycle and progression and response of being able to use that sugar, those carbs, that caffeine to feel good. And so it gives us kind of a double boost. And so if you're struggling with making good changes and good habits around those kinds of things, it's because there's just extra things built into that. There's also a lot of cultural, social, family ties to food and drink and celebration. And so, I don't believe that food is just fuel. I think that food is celebratory, it's cultural, it's family, there's so many emotions wrapped up in that. And so it can be really challenging. There's also a lot of neurochemicals tied to our response and pleasure around food and drink. So we're human, right? it is a little challenging, but don't feel too badly about it. Just be aware and decide where you can make changes. So you've got the cue, a trigger that tells your brain which routine to use, right? It's 3 o'clock and I'm a couple of doors down from the vending machine and it goes off around 3 o'clock every day. You can hear the coins and you can hear the food and the drink falling because people are in that kind of post lunch slump and it's not quite time to go home, and so they need to pick me up. So then the routine is the physical, mental, or emotional behavior that follows the cue, right? So it's 3 o'clock, I'm feeling tired, I'm yawning, I've got a couple more hours of work. Okay, I normally at 3 o'clock go to the vending machine, so I'm going to go do that routine. Then the reward is you see your friends at the vending machine. You get the positive stimulus of that routine because you get your item, right? There's nothing more fun than reaching in and getting the item out after you've pressed the button. I still think that's just so cool. But I do not go to the vending machine. I have everything I need in my office so that I'm not tempted, but I do hear it a lot. And then at the center of this, there's a craving, right? The craving is that you want some relief. And most of the cravings is that you want some relief. I would say that's pretty universal. And so the power is in the loop, right? And so if you want to stop this loop or this cycle, you've got to stop it at some point in this process. And usually it's after you get the trigger, because your environment is set up to trigger you, to alert you to things going on in the environment. That's how our brains are hardwired for survival. So the cues are going to be harder unless, like for me, going a different way home, that kind of took some of the cue out, right? Because I'm not seeing the sign that's telling me, hey, this is your favorite drink in town. Go get this drink. So you've got to eliminate as many cues as you can, because otherwise you're going to be constantly triggered. But you can't eliminate all cues and triggers. And then once you get the cue, here's the thing. If you can avoid it, that's the best. But if you can adapt to it, this is like any stressor, or alter it, then that's the next best, right? So that you intercept your brain and stop the loop and say, okay, I got cued. I saw my favorite sign. I'm not going to pull in and get that drink. But now I need to replace it, right? Because we don't do well in subtracting. Like in math class, right? We always like to add, we didn't like to subtract. Same way with our bodies and our brains. And so, what can I do now instead of going and getting that drink, that coffee, that whatever? What can I do instead? So for me, it's my water bottle. When I hear that vending machine, because that used to be a big thing for me because I worked in a hospital and sometimes the only thing we could get was out of a vending machine, or like K through 12 school vending machines were like a field trip. So when I hear a vending machine, that makes me want to go get something, even if I don't have any change, even if my action card doesn't have any money on it, even if I'm not really hungry. When I hear that, I have to be really mindful of, Abby, you don't want anything, right? And so I've got my water bottle. I've got snacks in my office. Those are things that I will go when I hear that sound, instead of getting up and doing something different, I'll grab my water bottle and I'll go outside and I'll walk, or I'll go around and I'll walk in my building, just to break that cycle for me. It will be something different for you, but I want to give you examples so that you can be creatively thinking about, where could I make a change? And then the reward for me is that I feel good because I said no to the vending machine, or I said no to my favorite drink on my way home. And so my reward is my pat on the back, right? Which is not as much fun, let's be honest. But I got to say no to that. And then I can find other treats to reward myself with, right? But you don't want to get into a habit of over rewarding yourself for these things, because then it could create a shopping issue, or it could create any number of other issues. And I did that, right? So when I stopped eating food, when I stopped eating and kind of emotionally eating in response to stress, then I started buying things. So I created a new problem that I didn't have before, because I was like, oh, well, I didn't get that drink, so I'm going to order these earrings, or whatever it is. And so you have to be really, really careful when you're trying to eliminate habits, that the new habits that you replace this with are not the same kind of habit, right? Over shopping or overspending is also not healthy. It's just not drinking Cokes and coffees and Mountain Dews. So think about that, because that's often something that people will do because it's so painful. And it truly is painful to the brain and body, because you're taking something away that gives it pleasure, that gives it pain relief. And so sugar and carbs, the reason it feels so good is you literally get pain relief. So if you're having mental or emotional pain from something and you eat that donut, like we had Barbie donuts in the house this morning, and thankfully I had already brushed my teeth, because going back to get a donut before I left home this morning was very tempting. But I was like, I don't want to have to brush my teeth again. So just I held my water bottle very tightly. I grabbed my purse and I walked very quickly out of the house, because my mom bought Barbie donuts for the kids last night. And so it's one of those things where you have to decide, do I want the donut? Last night when my mom brought the donuts and they were fresh, I picked the least, decorated donut that was on there, and I enjoyed it. But this morning, I'm like, do I really want what's probably becoming a stale, cold donut after I've already brushed my teeth? Today it was a no. So I'm not saying not to do things that you enjoy. I'm saying be really cognizant of the choices that you're making. So I still definitely love the sugar. Some common habit loops that I've already mentioned are things like the donut and the coffee. You get the reward of the blood sugar, the caffeine, the break. And then, you've completed that cycle because maybe your blood sugar dropped. Maybe you were low of energy. Maybe you were overwhelmed by your inbox. I know I get that way. I was feeling that way this morning. And so what did I do? I filled my water bottle up and I went for a walk, because I kept staring at my inbox before this class thinking, I just cleared this out yesterday and now they've already boomeranged back and I need to work on other things. And so anyway, we all get those moments. And so I was like, you know what? It's not a donut or coffee, it's a walk and it's water. And then, we get the break and we get the pleasure of knowing that we created a healthier habit. Same thing, you've got the energy's low, get some coffee, and then you get the reward of caffeine. And there's a lot about caffeine that really makes it difficult to say no to, because it is really helpful. If y'all were on my talk last week, we talked about caffeine and how it blocks the adenosine receptors. And so it makes it really difficult to wean off of caffeine, because it's not giving you energy, it's telling your brain that you're not tired. And so that's why the crash is so hard, because you're not really getting more energy, you're actually just telling your body that you can push through when you've already exhausted yourself. And so really thinking about how we use caffeine is important. It and sugar are going to be big ones, I think, for a lot of people. And that's why I used them here. But this could literally be anything. So when you feel overwhelmed, maybe you go stretch or chat with your coworkers or refill your water bottle or go walk. And then the reward is the break. So how you habit stack. When I blank, I will blank because it provides me with blank. So after brushing my teeth, I will take my supplements because it makes me feel healthy. So literally anything that you want to do. After I walk the dog, I will do 10 squats because it makes me feel healthy. After I drink my coffee, I will refill my water bottle because it makes me feel healthy and happy. Um, after I clear my inbox, I will go to the break room and chat with a coworker because it makes me feel happy. Literally anything that you want to put in here to form a new habit. This is called habit stacking. So every time you do one thing, brush my teeth, you do another thing, which is take my supplements, and you tie that to why you want to do that, what the reward is. And that's a new habit loop. So for every time you want to actually create a new habit or break an old habit, you have to create those kind of habit stack examples to really make it easier for yourself. So after I turn on the shower, I'll do 10 squats. When I wake up, I'm going to gratitude journal. After I get in my car, I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes. When I drink my coffee, I'm going to get water. When I walk into work, I'm going to take the stairs. When I sit down for lunch or dinner, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths. Or maybe it's prayer for you. Maybe you say a blessing. These are just some examples to get your creativity going. And then James Clear says all big things come from small beginnings. And so it's really this idea of taking baby steps. Laura Casey does a lot around professional development and personal development. And she says that um, small progress is still progress, right? So taking the tiniest baby steps are really going to be helpful when you're trying to start something new and focusing on one thing at a time, right? When you want to get healthy or lose weight or exercise or get fit, there are a million ways to do that, right? There are so many things that you probably want to do, need to do to get healthier because you're probably doing a lot of different habits that are not serving you. But if you just focus on water, and then when water becomes a habit that you don't have to think about, then focus on your nutrition and then focus on your movement or whatever order you choose. One thing at a time is going to best serve you. And then James Clear also says the power of tiny gains. So 1% better every day. And so it's just the matter of if you can just make one small improvement, how can I be 1% better than I was yesterday? Can I take one extra sip of water? Can I close my apps in my phone, 1% sooner than I did the day before I'm going to bed? It really does add up over the year. And so identifying your triggers is something that we've really been hinting at. So writing down the things that you're like, okay, this stresses me out, and when this happens, this is what I do. If you can write those down, that's super helpful to helping you create a plan to avoid it, to alter it, to adapt it. And so where does the habit happen? What time of day? How do you feel when it happens? Are other people involved? Does it happen right before or after something else? Right? Okay, so for me, it would be when does this behavior happen? It happens every day when I would clock out as a nurse at 3 o'clock, right? Which just happens to be when our cortisol levels start to kind of decrease and we start needing a pick me up. It's also about 2 hours after lunch. So 3 o'clock is just the hour where you really need extra support. What time of day? 3 p.m. How do I feel when it happens? Probably tired, overwhelmed, grumpy. Are other people involved? Sometimes not, right? But if we're getting off work, people are involved. Does it happen right before or after something else? Yes, it happens after I clock out of work in that situation. And so those are some things that now I can go and think, okay, what could I do differently? One of the things that I started doing was before this time in my life when I was trying to stop drinking so much Mountain Dew, I never had a water bottle with me. It wasn't really that popular, 10 or 15 years ago to always have a water bottle on hand. And so if I wanted to drink something, I literally would have to stop and get it. And so I started taking a refillable cup with me so that I didn't have to stop to get anything to drink. And so before I left work, I would actually go get some water with some good ice. So I got to have the same crunchy cubed ice, but I had it with me as I left. And I started adding things to the water to make it more fun and enjoyable. And so I still had my water, my beverage on the way home. It just wasn't me buying a lot of sugar and a lot of caffeine. So that was one way that I identified my triggers and then kind of course corrected. So 7 steps to cultivate habit change, things like writing down your goal, listing out the reasons why you want to, identifying those obstacles and challenges, drafting a plan, seeking accountability. So I told everyone that I was breaking up with Mountain Dew back in the day, and they all laughed, and that was okay. They had already heard it before. But that was the time that, I made it public. I even posted it on Facebook, which I don't post a lot on Facebook anymore, but back then I posted all the time. And so I'm like, I'm giving a Mountain Dew. Please help me. If you see me in line, tell me to get out of line. Follow the plan. So track your progress and evaluate how you can make changes, and then maintain your motivation as you can, right? Give yourself pep talks, but really work on forming that discipline. And then set your intention. So this is a very vague one. This is not a great one, but I will be the best version of myself by my next birthday. And so that's hard because it's, how are you going to measure it? But you can say, I'm the person who works out every day. I'm the person who reads for pleasure most days of the week. I'm the person who fill in the blank. And so Wayne Dyer says our intention creates our reality. So if we wake up and we decide this is what we're going to do today, then we're much, much more likely to do it. Gretchen Rubin also has some great resources. She has a ton of books and resources, but the one I want to point out is the Four Tendencies. And so, are you an upholder, an obliger, a rebel, or a questioner? The people who are going to meet outer expectations, so the obliger or the upholder meets outer expectations. The people who do that and prioritize outer expectations over inner are going to need more accountability and help. And so for me, I am an obliger. I will meet outer expectations and I will prioritize those over inner expectations. So that's why accountability really works for me. I have some rebels in my life, and they are going to resist all expectations, theirs and the people's that that put them on them. And so they really have to dig deep and feel out, okay, what do I want to get out of this? Because they're likely not to take any action. An upholder is really who I want to be. They meet all expectations, and that's what I want to do. And then a questioner will resist outer expectations, but they'll meet the ones that they have. And so if you like this, if you think this is helpful, you can go to her website. You can take the quiz. You probably already know what you are. But she also has a book and podcast and lots of resources. She's one of my favorite go-tos, especially early on my personal development journey. But knowing who you are is really helpful. So I have a lot of different accountability partners, and I schedule in my week times to touch base with them. So some people I just text, and I find people who need the same kind of encouragement. And so I have a mom that I meet with every couple of weeks, and we talk about work stuff because we're working moms with young children. And so we meet. I have a mentor that I touch base with every couple of weeks, and we talk about my goals. I have fitness goals. So, my personal trainer and one of my best friends who also has a lot of health and fitness goals, we touch base once a week, usually in person or via text. And we'll say, okay, how did you do on your goals this week? Or we'll say, hey, next week I really want to work on this. Will you text me and ask me how that went? And we kind of came up with this thing of, it's okay, life is busy. If you can't text me back in the moment, that's no problem. Like sometimes I just need to know that I'm going to be texting my friend or texting my coach to tell them an update. And that really works for me. Some people would hate that idea, but it might work for you. And then be persistent. So it takes about 66 days to form a new habit. There's even some thought that it may take up to 90 days, but just be persistent with it. It's going to take probably multiple opportunities to, really challenge yourself in multiple experiences to really say, okay, I want to be this person, and so I'm going to do this habit. There are 5 mistakes to avoid. So, you don't control your environment. You've got to control it, right? You're trying to change too many habits at once. Just pick one. You're not committed to the habit change. Don't force it. If you're not committed to it, then don't. Maybe pick something else. You're too focused on the outcome. It's not about the outcome. It's about the process and who you become in the process, right? It's not about how many books you read. It's about that you became a reader, right? And then you assume small changes don't add up. Small changes, it's consistency, right? Consistently showing up every day, even if you can't give 100%, right? You're never going to be able to give 100%. But consistently showing up is going to move the needle. You're going to get up the ladder faster than showing up perfectly on an inconsistent day, right? And perfect is air quotes because we're human, we're not perfect. So these are the 5 mistakes to avoid. Here's a habit tracker. There are a million versions of a habit tracker online, but having a habit tracker can be helpful using an app. I like a version of both a paper and an app. Remembering that you're 100% capable of changing your old habits and changing things that don't work for you. You just have to remember to give yourself that pep talk. Remember self-confidence, self-trust, self-belief, self-compassion. How change is created: you have the idea, the thought, the feeling, you create the plan, you start the habits, you make a commitment because you're disciplined. It becomes your lifestyle and it becomes who you are, and then change actually happens. That's the process. And then the wisdom of atomic habits, the person that you believe you are, right? I'm an athlete, so I'm going to work out every day or most days. And then the goal you wish to achieve, it actually happens, right? You become who you say you are. So successful people are simply those with successful habits. So we'd love for you to follow us on our social media channels, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to pull up the chat if there's anything that you would like to add. I know y'all can see this screen, but this will help me. I'm glad it's so helpful. Good. And I know we'll be coming to our time in just a few minutes, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, Marina, thanks for putting in the link to the newsletter. That's awesome. Thank you. Any questions or any comments or feedback? I'd love to hear from you guys.
I also added the habit tracker from Atomic Habits. It's on their website, but there's the PDF if y'all want to take that.
Perfect. Thanks,
Download
Miranda.
it.
You're the best. Miranda's also one of my accountability partners, but she's my sunshine, get out in nature accountability partner. So sometimes we'll send pictures of feet, or we'll send pictures of the sunshine or the sky or a tree, and we'll know, okay, we're out getting our sunshine, out getting our nature.
Sunshine breaks are good.
They are. They're so
It's
good.
finally, it feels like fall outside today, so a little bit.
Yes, I have on my new sweater, and I definitely am dressing for the weather I wish it was, because it's
Yeah.
really not cold enough for this sweater today. But we're thinking those good, healthy, positive thoughts. Well, I don't see any questions. Oh, thank you, Amelia. You're so sweet. That means so much coming from you. I really do appreciate you. I love to teach and I love health and wellness, because for so much of my life, I needed somebody that could walk ahead of me a little bit further along and show me where